Have you have you ever had a school project that you worked for relentlessly, but the results were a failure? What was the first question that popped up in your mind? What did I do to deserve this? Have you ever had a married friend who worked so hard to make the marriage work, but ended up with a divorce anyway? What was the first question that popped up in his or her mind? What did I do to deserve this? Have you ever studied for an uncountable number of hours preparing for an important test, but you still didn't get your desired mark? What was the first question that popped up in your mind? What did I do to deserve this? Have you ever had a friend who determinedly practiced piano, but his or her pieces ended up being sloppy and unprofessional? What was the first question that popped up in his or her mind? What did I do to deserve this? The situations and times in which we ask that particular question can be endless. But what are the consequences of asking such a question? How can asking what did I do to deserve this as a habit result in disastrous consequences? And how can we stop those negatives? That's exactly what I'm willing to discuss with you today. So first, asking a question like what did I do to deserve this activates what I like to call the frustrated brain mode. So what does that mean? That basically means that the occurrence of bad situations activates the brain area responsible for processing emotions like fear, anger, and anxiety, which is called the amygdala. What this area does is that it activates the stress response system in your brain, making you physically and mentally prepared to respond to a threat. So with all the stress going around in your body and brain, the areas responsible for making good judgments, the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, began suffering a loss of neurons, affecting your ability of making good judgments, as well as decreasing the levels of serotonin, the hormone that's responsible for making you feel feelings like joy and happiness. And with less serotonin, you begin having physical pain, as well as amplifying anger. And this is how such a question can affect you psychologically. Another consequence that comes from asking such a question is jumping to false and unnecessary conclusions. An example of this is saying, I must have done something to deserve the pain, or God doesn't like me. And the best way to describe this was in Surah Al-Fajr, when God said, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ. This verse can clearly show us that it's natural for us to jump to false and unnecessary conclusions. But what it also tells us is that we need to acknowledge the fact that God honors and favors us, and that He will never do something that's bad for us. Now, after we came across the consequences of asking, what did I do to deserve this? We need to know how to cut off that bad habit. What are the solutions? So one of the most important solutions is paying attention to your self-talk. And as Chick Mormon said, author of the book Talk Sense to Yourself, Personal and Language Power, once you notice your thoughts and actions, you are in a position to alter them. This puts you in control. So whenever you actually start tracing your thoughts, habits, and actions, you can change them. Another solution that's really helpful is believing in your own ability of making your own solution, as well as believing in the fact that God will help you. So whenever you pass by bad times, you need to believe that God is helping you, as well as believing in your own ability to craft your own end, your own solution. And the best way that described this was in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, when God said, فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَ الْجَمْعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ قَالَ كَلَّا إِنَّ مَعِي رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ فأوحينا إليه أن اضرب بعصاك الحجر فانفلق فكان كل فرق كالطود العظيم. In those verses, Moses had a solid belief that God is helping him and that God will guide him, while the people believe that they're going to be sleeping with the fishes tonight. In those verses, we can see that you can change bad times you're passing by if you change the mindset you're planning on thinking with. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that before you start losing faith and before you start jumping to false and unnecessary conclusions and before you even start thinking about the solutions, remember that God said, وما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير. And for this reason and many more, you should cut off the habit of asking, what did I do to deserve this? Thank you.